I blame the goose. So thank you, everyone. Welcome back to a break on a Wednesday afternoon. Today, we're going to continue with our talks about how to roll out bibliometric services across campus. And with us right now is Dany Savard and Andrea Kosavic, both from York University. Dany Savard is the Director of Open Scholarship at York, and Andrea Kosavic is the Associate Dean of Digital Engagement and Strategy. Super. So I'll pass the microphone or the presentation screen over to you guys.
Sorry, which of you would like to share your presentation?
Hi, Isabella, that'll be me.
Okay, you should have rights now.
Great, thank you. Okay, great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. So Andrea and I today would like to talk about our recent efforts to develop a curriculum on research visibility for a varied audience of faculty researchers at York University. So today we'll provide you with some background on what led us to up to us taking on this project, and also some information on the context that we are currently operating in. Then we'll talk about the opportunity itself and how we came to build our lessons for the workshop series that we developed in collaboration with a number of partners and colleagues at the university. And finally, Andrea will lead you through some of the feedback we received, and how we plan to use this feedback to inform future iterations of the workshop series. So a little about the context first. So we are academic librarians working at York University in Toronto. And York University is a large, comprehensive teaching and research university with a community of over 53,000 students. And so we are known for our programs in the liberal arts, creative arts, and professional studies, but also increasingly known for our programs in health, engineering, and sciences. And so we have multiple campuses, with the main campus being the Keele campus at the north end of Toronto. And we also have a bilingual campus in Midtown, some professional learning sites downtown, and a new campus that is soon to open in Markham, Ontario. So we've also recently released a new academic plan for 2020-2025, and have made commitments with the plan to further explore digital cultures and act on the opportunity to achieve new levels of research engagement. So in terms of the libraries at York, so of course the libraries support all the various campuses that I've just mentioned. And we have our own list of strategic imperatives, one of which is an intentional commitment to sustaining open access, democratizing scholarship, and anticipating the evolving scholarly record. And so we recently, or relatively recently, restructured to support these priorities and try and move our work forward in new ways. And so these are the various departments that make up the libraries. You know, 3 of these departments that I've highlighted here contribute into scholar visibility in their own ways. But in terms of the workshop series that was created and that we'll be talking about today, this was led out of the Open Scholarship. And now I'll invite Andrea to speak a little bit about how research is supported at the institution.
Thanks, Dany. So from a contextual perspective, we have an office of the Vice President of Research and Innovation, and within that, an Associate Vice President of Research, who works with associate deans of research who are appointed to the myriad faculties that we have at York. I'm happy to share that the libraries are part of this research planning ecosystem. We have an associate dean of research, and that associate dean of research, ADR, is present at the table and at those meetings. The libraries partner and have a long-standing partnership and visibility track record for scholar visibility initiatives at the institutional level. And an example of that is the Dean of Libraries being a founding co-chair of our Open Access Open Data Steering Committee with the Associate Vice President of Research. And we recently ratified an open access policy in 2019. So next slide. And just to talk a little bit about, the research visibility curriculum opportunity that we had, that we're talking about today. And to give some context, this opportunity exists within a larger framework called the Research Commons, which is an initiative of, again, that same office, the Vice President of Research and Innovation, and looking to promote research excellence at York. Essentially, it brings together seasoned researchers and research staff together with campus researchers who may be newer to the grant writing process or who would like to refresh their knowledge or are seeking to apply for more complex grants. And to that end, the Research Commons offers grant clinics, mentorships, and workshops. And I'll pass it back to Dany.
Thank you. So out of the creation of the Research Commons came an ask that was directed at us, and the ask essentially boiled down to this question. It was a series of questions, but I've sort of pulled them together to kind of make it a succinct ask. And so we were asked, could the libraries develop a hands-on workshop for faculty that focuses on tools and techniques available to increase the discoverability of scholarship on the web? And so we knew that there was an appetite for this kind of programming and that this was a tremendous opportunity to partner with another office to put into practice some of what we were planning already internally within the libraries. But we also knew that we had to take into account some factors and pressure points we had experienced in our individual dealings and consultations with faculty on questions of scholar visibility. So we knew that taking into account existing preferences and some information-seeking behaviors was necessary in order to properly address the characteristics and needs of our learners in this context at this moment. So first, there was a desire to see if we could design the session for different types of researchers from different disciplinary backgrounds. But York being the multidisciplinary institution that it is, and knowing that this was going to be open as a commons for all, we knew we had to anticipate that some biases might creep into how participants engaged with the material, and that since this was going to be a session that had to center the tools, so ORCID, Web of Science, Scopus, our repositories, preprint repositories, Altmetric, Google Scholar, Mendeley, ResearchGate, etc., we knew we had to provide a critical lens on the reported value of these tools, and also give attention to how these tools are generally endorsed and why. So we refined the original ask to a kind of broader problem that aimed at helping researchers appreciate the potential of available options and invite them to work with us more directly after the fact to apply what worked best for them. So, and this is sort of the refined kind of problem, or our articulation of the opportunity, I should say. So, after considering the anticipated needs of attendees by taking into account the partial data we already had on hand in terms of what tends to drive faculty to want to learn more about research impact and scholar visibility, and the various items that we wanted to impart ourselves, we built a lesson off the following learning objectives. And so I'm not going to read it all out, but really it was a focus here on recognizing the potential of persistent identifiers and researcher identifiers, ensuring that researchers knew how to create or update an ORCID or Scopus ID or a researcher ID, then recognizing the potential of repositories, and then appreciating the differences between different profiling platform tools. And so flipping that in terms of how we structured the lesson, this is essentially the order that we followed, and these are the categories that we used when inviting faculty to learn with us and begin a conversation. More practically speaking, in terms of session design, we split the content that I just described into 3 modules with activity-based components, so some breakout discussions, some polling. And we really wanted to make sure that we provided equal space for broader questions that could be addressed to the group as a whole, and wanting to make sure that people felt comfortable doing that. But we also wanted to support those that preferred to have individual side conversations and wanted to look at their very specific needs. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure that attendees understood that we were there to follow up on any consultation requests and that we were ready to provide customized support where needed. So just before we go into a more formal review of the feedback, a couple of lessons learned, neither of which were particularly surprising, but it was still good to kind of confirm. You know, not all participants wanted to immediately create a researcher profile after considering the context that we were exposing here. It was really more about coming together as a group and learning as much about the context as possible, and then coming away to kind of rethink what would work best for them. However, having said that, people were still very much concerned with efficiency, the efficiency of an approach for generating researcher visibility. What is the most efficient approach is a common question that we have received from different faculty researchers. And I'll pass it off to Andrea, who will take you through the feedback.
Great, thank you, Dany. So we've taught this course a number of times, and in more recent iterations took the opportunity to gauge the awareness of our participants throughout the workshop. And so in the most recent, we asked 10 questions in total, and I'll be sharing the responses to a few of those with you today. So next slide. And so the first one is the classic around misconceptions around open access. And we were really looking to test around gaps in knowledge about self-archiving. And you can imagine with the open access policy, we kind of want to know how we're doing. Some things are more tangible in this kind of a forum. And so you can see we still have some work to do in that area, but happy to see at least the majority are starting to grasp that self-archiving possibilities are out there. Next slide. And so we're aware that researcher identity platforms create confusion, and really wanted to tease out by being deliberately vague in this question of, equating open access repositories with researcher identity platforms and social networks, and essentially use this question as more of a jumping off point to discuss these differences. So next question. And then, of course, just curious around the nascent uptake of research identifiers and looking to see what percentage of our respondents are actually making use of those. And there's a lot of opportunity for growth and discussion in that area, as you can see from our results. And so next slide. And, finally, this question, we asked the group, has any of the information that we presented throughout the course of the presentation prompted you to consider any of the following actions? And I've only shown 4, There was a choice of other as well, and then a choice of seeking to delete one's researcher profile. Both of those had 0 responses. So you can see, and as Dany was speaking to the intentions of our curriculum, we really wanted researchers to have the information so that they can reflect and make their own decisions. And so we see that is the largest response that we received. But there was a little bit more interest in repositories and indexing, and our conversation did prompt some to consider signing up for researcher profile services. So next slide. And we also had, and I think it's wonderful to have a Research Commons umbrella for workshops of this type, because we were brought into a meeting with 5 associate deans of research, primarily from the arts, humanities, social sciences, but also including the Faculty of Environment and Urban Change, and as well our law faculty, Osgood. And it was such a wonderful opportunity to speak to the ADRs, because they themselves have active research identities. And so they're of the research culture, but they're also trying to promote positive upgrades to the research culture, or help researchers continue to develop in their research. And so next slide, they offered us some very valuable feedback on our presentation, and told us that the content, in their opinion, favored STEM fields, which we didn't disagree with. One interesting piece of feedback, which definitely speaks to perhaps how we presented content, or more opportunities with our campus, was that, why was there a section on open access in this presentation? So there was a perception around open access being unrelated to research impact strategy. So that was an interesting piece of feedback. There was a request for a separate targeted session for arts and social sciences and humanities. Others simply said this is just too much information to process. We need to scale that back in a way. And further to that, what we heard was that there was a simple instrumental recommendation that was sought. And to us, that was an interesting dissonance to our learning outcomes, because we were seeking to provide our participants with the tools to make informed decisions on their behalf. We weren't going to say, don't sign up for Mendeley or don't sign up for ResearchGate. We were looking to provide a more balanced view, so that the researchers could decide whether they want to continue, or whether they would want to step away from those platforms. So next slide. And they also gave us a little bit more context around how they see researcher visibility, and of course this is no surprise to anyone present today that they feel that there is bias in how research is counted and measured, and they understand that metrics help to articulate impact, but they are so concerned about the estranging of researchers in these discussions, and asked us perhaps to contextualize more in terms of research visibility, which ironically was the title of our presentation. So you can just see there's this tension and concern around taking a lighter touch to these conversations. So again, just an interesting and delicate space, at least in our context, to be. And of course, there was one final piece of feedback where they were looking for a discussion of more external venues for mounting research and for realizing impact. So next slide. And so for us, we were able to share with them that at the time of giving the presentation, we were in procurement for Altmetric Explorer, so we have that. And so the training and the rollout will play a big part of our conversations with those groups, and we'll be able to offer them more. But we will be redoubling our efforts to offer targeted workshops and training opportunities that incorporate field-specific case studies and testimonials from researchers themselves to try to help promote understanding and uptake. And of course, we will continue to emphasize our educational initiatives on open scholarship and its ties to enhancing research visibility. And so with that, we want to invite questions, but I notice we're right at time.
No, that's great. We invite questions all the time. We've got some flexibility built in there. So if we have a few questions coming in, I'll start with some simple, quick ones here. Going back to your survey there, it said that not all participants wanted to create a profile, but only 17, and in fact 17 out of the 25 said, yeah, thanks, maybe later. Which we all know means never. Did you get any understanding of perhaps why? I mean, were there particular profile systems that they were resistant to, or they just outright rejected? Maybe were the privacy concerns that they expressed or anything like that?
So it's interesting. We didn't have the scope or the time to get any qualitative feedback in the course of the workshop, and we presented those that breadth of information for each different platform. So I could imagine it would have given some researchers pause, but we don't have the data to actually say whether that was the case.
Right. But one of the other questions is, considering that there was a fair bit of, well, I mean, not confusion, but hesitancy, with all these recommendations, just given the range of choices, do you think that perhaps in the future you'll focus on a specific tool, training on a specific tool in the future to, in a sense, remove all the variability and cut to the chase? And
I think we did, to a certain extent, in terms of ORCID and our focus on ORCID integration, and we are certainly committed to continuing with that priority. And there is the possibility of us focusing in on a few tools, or maybe heightening our focus on a few tools, but we do need to work more closely with some of our ADRs and faculty leads to evaluate which tools should be highlighted in each kind of disciplinary context. Certainly, there are some there's pockets of interest for particular tools in different communities, and we want to work with those preferences where we can, while still bringing our lessons and our points of view on a number of items, certainly around the responsible use of metrics and around some concerns around privacy and commodification.
Yeah, there's always a schism between the hard sciences and the social sciences, and certainly, trying to convince a humanities researcher to sign up for a Clarivate Web of Science ID, there's not a big take up for that, but that's where ORCID, I guess, has a benefit, because you can put anything in your profile in ORCID. Did you think has York built an ORCID integration yet, whereby the university can push a notification to a person's ORCID profile saying, yes, so-and-so studies at York? Or
so we do have a system built, but we are in the process, and I'm sure we'll be announcing this soon, of bringing in an electronic CV management system. And so wanting to roll that out concurrently, as opposed to fatiguing our community with too many separate messages. But what we've seen from evaluating a variety of different platforms, there is quite a case, and there is a lot of added value that ORCID does bring to these systems.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just got a comment in there saying that actually you can actually put anything in your researcher ID profile, since it now integrates with the Publons platform. So I stand corrected. It works for humanities researchers as well too. Great. Okay, dokes. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thanks so much, Dany and
Thank you.
So next, we're going to continue on our theme that Chris